Huh?
David will be my focus.
We're on live. Oops. So good afternoon. I'm going to go ahead and start because I'm looking forward to this interview. Oh, and flowers arrived.
Oh, brilliant.
I'm definitely going to start now. So welcome to this oral history session. This is a tradition that Sam started many years ago, where we have the opportunity to learn from leaders in the field. And it's my sincere honor to be interviewing Dr. Linda Berenguer. Lynn is currently a full professor at the University of Minnesota School of Nursing, distinguished teaching professor at University of Minnesota, and the UM faculty legislative liaison for the entire university. She has a very extraordinary career. She started, her initial training was as a nurse. She got a BSN, Bachelor of Science in Nursing, at St. Olaf College in Minnesota. Her pediatric nurse practitioner and MS in community health nursing at the University of Colorado in Denver. In 1985, she began an adolescent health postgraduate fellowship at the University of Minnesota. 1991, received her PhD in educational psychology at the University of Minnesota. 2 years later, she founded and was a long-term director for the Center for Adolescent Nursing. She has had a very, very robust academic career, which includes extensive research, being involved in many federal grants, being a PI on several R01s. She has been a leader in terms of training and faculty development, including having long-standing CDC and other funding to run these training centers. And she's been, based on the interviews that I've had the pleasure of conducting over the last 6 months, quite an extraordinary mentor. Lynn is well known and has had a robust career domestically, but also internationally. And I would like to acknowledge that, unfortunately, the International Association for Adolescent Health is meeting in a different room at this point in time. So Susan Sawyer, and for those of you who are not here, I'm sorry that you're not able to join us, because I know that Lynn has been an active member of the international community for a long time. She was the sole U.S. representative to the UTeach program, which is a European training and education in adolescent and health program. And her innovative and passionate training techniques really have been disseminated worldwide through that program. In 2009, she was elected to be president of the International Association for Adolescent Health, or IAAH, and she served in that role until 2013. And last year, she was honored with the FSAHM Lifetime Achievement Award. So it's really a pleasure to have this extraordinary leader here to share with us some of the things that she's learned over the course of her career, so we can honor her and learn more about how she's done it.
Thank you.
So to begin, and I should say that Dr. Marianne Felice, who in the past has done this role, guided me towards her process for doing this. And Marianne, if you're in the audience, I appreciate that. I have had the opportunity to talk with Lynn twice, and I've had the opportunity to talk extensively with Dr. Bob Blum and Dr. Michael Resnick and Renee Sieving. So basically, in that process, I've gotten to hear a lot about Lynn's life and career, and it's really been an honor to do that. So I thought that I would just have Lynn start at the beginning and share with you some of how her family shaped her and her career choices. Thank you, Lynn.
Carol, thank you so much. I want to add right at the beginning that in 1984, December 18th, my first day on the job, I met Michael Resnick, and we are about to celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary. So there was a lot of good things that came out of that fellowship that I did for 6 months at the University of Minnesota. How did my family shape my career? And Carol, I loved the question, because it really brought me back to the role my father played in my upbringing. I was the second of 2 daughters, and I was supposed to be John Lynn Berenguer, and so I got to sort of be raised as the son in some respects, and at that time that was a good thing. And I think it had a profound impact on my pathway, because the opportunities for women were not the same, even as they are now. So that was part of the pathway set in motion in early childhood, going to the Twins games as the son that wasn't, with my father and enjoying sports and all of that. But there was a moment that I can think back on as really setting the course, the trajectory for my career. My father was a PhD in physics, and if you've ever set a thermostat, he has 7 patents on that thermostat from Honeywell. And he had brought a group of people, they were all men actually at the time, all PhD physicists, down to Florida, where they were headquartered for an all-day, 2-day work meeting. And that night when he came home from that meeting, it's the second time I ever remember my father crying. The first time was when my great-grandmother died. And in learning what had happened, he had brought down a fine gentleman named Chuck Johnson, who was African American. This was in the early to mid 60s. And they walked into the Sofitel Hotel where they were having their meeting, and he was told that Chuck Johnson couldn't go into the meeting, Dr. Johnson. And my father moved the meeting, of course, and made sure that Honeywell never had any relationships with that company again for decades. And it was so profoundly, he was so devastated by that experience, and growing up in Minnesota and had never experienced anything like that. And I think that that experience told me no matter what I would do in my life, it had to be about social justice and dealing with those issues.
And then how did you get to nursing and public health nursing?
Well, if there were a lot of the younger, newer members in the room right now, I would want to explain that back in the late 60s, when I was picking my major for college and my career path, I had sort of 2 choices, nursing or teaching. And I was terrified at the thought of being in front of people and teaching. So I became a nurse. It was about that profound and deep in thinking about it. I did make a journey through several other majors before I landed on that. I dropped my unknown in chemistry class, and that sort of ended my chemistry major very quickly. So I think I loved the connection with people that I could have in nursing. I didn't like hospital nursing at all. I didn't like that, all the equipment and calculations, and that just wasn't where my heart was. My heart was the time I would spend with people.
That's wonderful. And then academics. So you really started out...
Well, how did I get from nursing to academics? Yeah. And I immediately found something called public health nursing. I think some of the language that people use is community health nursing. Basically, I was 22 years old, and I was working in Champaign-Urbana, and I had a caseload of 75 families. Most of them were young parents, as in teen parents, a few elders. I was a school nurse for a middle school, a grade school, and a high school. And I volunteered in the evening at Planned Parenthood and saved the $10 honorarium I got to take us on a trip at the end of 3 years. But I began work in public health nursing and just loved being in people's homes, figuring out what did we have to work with, what were the strengths, what were the capacities to bring to the situation that people were, all the diversity of experiences and economic diversity and racial ethnic diversity, just all of that. What could we bring together to address some of the issues that my families, the patients, and I was dealing with? How could we do that? And in part of that assignment was I was assigned to teach the prenatal classes at the high school for the pregnant teens in Champaign-Urbana. And one of the tasks I had to figure out was how to get the middle school student to the high school for that class. And that's where I got launched into working with adolescents. But you asked the question, getting into teaching. I was asked one day by my supervisor, would you mind taking a student out with you in your car, my old Pinto wagon, with plastic seats and no air conditioning in Champaign-Urbana in the summertime? Would you take a student out with you? And I realized I loved mentoring and just saying, here's what's so great about this kind of work. Here's what I love about it. I hope you can share that passion for it as well. And from there, I knew I wanted to teach, and that's how I got into academics. I taught at a baccalaureate program for 7 years and realized I also wanted to do research and I wanted to teach graduate students. And so I returned in 1985 to get my PhD, and that's the day I met Michael.
I have to ask you, that money you saved up when you were working for Planned Parenthood to go on a trip, do you remember what trip you took?
Yes, it was actually a trip to Europe. But the $10 did not cover the whole cost.
So talk a little bit about arriving at Minnesota and the environment at that time and what was going on in terms of adolescent health.
Well, I have to brag about Minnesota to do that.
That's okay.
This morning, Larry D'Angelo said, I feel like the luckiest person in the world, and I feel that way. I actually had, I was teaching at St. Olaf, and I was at the college, and I was to give a class on adolescent health, which I thought was great. Now looking back on it, there was actually a class on adolescence. And I had written down in 1982 2 names of people who could come in and speak about it. And one of those 2 names was Michael Resnick. But I didn't meet him for 3 more years because I asked the other person to come to my class. But I was so fortunate. I took a weekend course in Duluth, Minnesota, and Bob Blum was the instructor. And I can still to this day tell you some of the things that he taught in that class because they made so much sense. He told stories, he made them memorable. He was a wonderful teacher. And from then on, I knew I wanted to go back and go to graduate school and learn from this guy. And so I felt very fortunate and also incredibly fortunate that Bob was a person that walked the talk of interdisciplinary training. In every aspect of training, there was equity around our disciplines, whether it was the support we got, the goals that we had, the mentoring that we got, and it was all cross disciplines. So if the mentor that I needed for a particular research project was of a different discipline than nursing, I worked with that mentor. You worked with the people that specialized in your interest areas, and I think that was a very fortunate opportunity. And very early on, I went to Bob, and I saw a call for I learned later, that was called an F-31 proposal from NIH, and I applied for that. I didn't get that. It was like a grant that you get while you're a PhD student, but I learned grant writing, the very basics of grant writing, doing that. And so from then on, I was in an environment that supported the growth of each of us, and he was a great mentor in that regard.
And since then, you've really moved on to be, I would say, really a mover and shaker in a lot of different ways. You've been a leader in SAHM. You've been a leader in the field of nursing and adolescent nursing, and have been at the table on behalf of adolescents at major nursing professional organizations and internationally with UTeach and IAAH. So I'm curious if you can talk to us a little bit about what drove you, what were your strategies, what sustained you, what made you persist during what must have been the normal ups and downs of a career to keep at it.
So a lot of questions and thoughts in there. I told you the story about the launching on the issue of equity and justice. And I think I look at the people right here now in the room, and I know you all know the importance for me of making sure that all of the disciplines in SAM would have equal voice, equal impact, equal opportunity for leadership within SAM, and that goal of creating equity within disciplinary equity within SAM, within LEA, within grant opportunities, all of that really was a driving force for me. I think I see a lot of smiles. I think you all know that. And it was also probably what got me in that very scary moment of going to the microphone at the business meeting 15 years ago and saying, I propose we change the name of this organization. And I will say that there were a few people, including Bob Blum, that said, go do it, Lynn, you have to do it. But he also said, I think you'll also find a very good home in the International Association for Adolescent Health. And that was many, many years ago that I joined that organization and did find a very good home there as well, the interest there. Now you asked I think that's what drove me. I think the strategies for trying to make change, whether it was at the university or within SAM, I think those strategies had to do with, I think also it was my father was very much of a manager and organizer. He liked to create systems that worked effectively and would get very irritated when systems didn't work well. I remember coming back to talk with Michael after registering for my first University of Minnesota PhD course, and there was no online anything, right? So I remember standing in this line and coming back, and I'm saying, oh my gosh, they need to change the way they do this. They need to do this, and they could do it this way, and they could do it this way. And Michael's saying, Lynn, just take your first course, and we'll work about changing the university system a little bit later. And many years later, I chaired the university's research committee. I got asked to do it, and I said, you understand, I'm from the School of Nursing. Yeah. But I did get that opportunity to make those changes, and then I became like a lobbyist, an unpaid, therefore an advocate for the university on behalf of the faculty at our state capitol the last 3 years of my career before my retirement.
So those strategies have translated well for you over the years, sounds like.
Yes.
You've talked on this a little bit. You're the second person outside of the medical profession to ever be interviewed for SAM Oral History. Abigail English was the first. And what are your reflections on the challenges and the opportunities of representing a profession in circles where it may be overlooked?
Carol gave me these questions, and I've been accused often of being a wordsmith, and so I came up with an alliteration. Communication, connections, and contributions. I think number one is, anyway, communication is the form of making something visible. And whether that's being effective in oral speaking, being effective in writing lay articles, being effective at a meeting. Good communication, I think, has been a key part with for all of us in our careers when we wanted to move something forward. It's central to advocacy. It's central to change. So I think that when we can have, many voices speaking, expressing, it helps us to be visible. When I joined SAHM in 1985, there was a fairly pervasive view that nurses didn't do research, except we did. And how could we make that visible? And so I had this opportunity, rather serendipitous opportunity. I was asked if I would be on the program committee, and could I organize a new thing, and it would be called a special interest group, a SIG. And that year, I think it was 17 SIGs that I was able to organize. And when you're in charge of something, you can kind of slip in your own thing, right? So we had our first nursing research SIG. And I think we've come up on a 32-year history of that, of the nursing research SIG. And that was one way of making it visible. There it was on the program. Someone had done a survey of articles published in our journal, in JOT, and the conclusion was that nurses weren't publishing very much. But it was based on the wrong assumption. The nurses that were publishing in there were putting their degree after their name, PhD. And those weren't called nurses' publications. So that needed to be clarified. I mean, just one piece after another. And I hope it wasn't just on behalf of nurses in the organization. I think I attended the first ever Society for Research on Adolescence. There were about, a couple hundred people in the room, maybe not even, in Madison, Wisconsin. And that organization grew exponentially, and we didn't as an organization. And one of the reasons why we were not embracing the diversity within our organization soon enough. And now that we have, it's just beautiful to see the kind of diversity that we have in this room, of all sorts. So that's communications, but then connections. My second C in my alliteration. I think that I've been accused of over-introducing people. I one time introduced Renee Sieving to somebody who had come back into the School of Nursing, and they looked at me and they laughed and they said, our offices were across the hall from each other for 6 years. I went, oh, sorry, I'd forgotten you met each other. But I think the more we can create this web of relationships, the more we love our work, and the more we enjoy being together and being energized and accomplishing things. John Santelli came up to me yesterday. He said, I'm working with Renee Sieving. I said, yeah. And I love seeing when fellows are going out to dinner together that were in the program many years ago, and seeing all the connections that have happened because you've been able to spark something, and sparking it through those connections. And then finally, my last C, Carol, and I don't know if I'm being too long here,
but you're fine,
is contributions. Bob Blum once said to me, it's a waste of time to go to a meeting and not make a contribution, at least one contribution. And man, that was an important message, such an important message. So if you're going to go to a meeting, make sure you make at least one contribution, and that's made your time worthwhile. And I think that probably the most important way that the nursing people, members of SAHM, and all other members of SAHM could help to elevate the organization was to sign up to make a contribution, to just say, hey, I'll organize that, I'll be on the program committee. In fact, when the nursing research group would get together, we would make sure that everyone who was playing a role somehow in SAHM volunteer role on a committee, whatever it was, a new FSAHM, whatever it was, that was recognized. Because that's such an important way to be able to say, I can help to change things. You know, the person that takes the minutes has the last word. So it's not a bad thing to volunteer to take minutes.
So it's important to acknowledge that all you have done was accomplished while you were raising children. With so many young professional parents in our field and in the audience, we have to talk about this. I'd like to read a part of a letter written by your children, which I have been given with permission. Mom somehow managed to balance an accomplished career with a life at home. The two don't have to be mutually exclusive. Occasionally, work kept her late, picking us up from school or practice. Our household was notorious for 8:30, 9, or even 9:30 dinners, but she never missed a game or a meet. She could somehow write a grant on the dining room table while helping us with the last-minute science project on the kitchen table. Thank you, Mom, for your constant energy and support. You consistently modeled strong moral character. She's a woman of integrity. She's honest, she is kind, she's energetic, she's brave, she's dedicated, she's generous, she's thoughtful, she is wicked smart. She is a great, she is loyal, she's a leader, she's a trusted advisor, she's a confidant. She's one heck of a great public speaker, and she's a fabulous mother and grandmother. So basically, we want to know how you did it. Because I know that of all your accomplishments, those kind of statements are way at the top. So how did you do it?
Carol, that was read last year when I received the award. I had no idea. I was just disappointed my children couldn't be here. And Michael had not seen the letter, but he knew the kids had written one, and Deborah was going to read it. So I want to say when I got up to accept the award, I could hardly speak, having just heard the letter. But the audience looked like a mess. I mean, they were just like wiping tears from their eyes and so on. I thought about that, you know, how did you do it? We all have our personal lives, whether they're partnered or with children or nieces and nephews or grandchildren, whatever they are, that we're, I don't know if I like the word balance. I'm starting to go in a different direction from that word and in my old age wisdom. I think that one of the things that helped me along the way, having a personal life that was equally important to my professional life, was learning to be present in the moment. I realized, it was like duh moment, but I hadn't figured it out for a while, that it really didn't do me any good to be thinking about a grant deadline while I was watching my son pitch at a baseball game. And that kind of multitasking just doesn't work. It doesn't accomplish anything. And children and youth, we all know when we're not present for them. And they know when we are. They know when we are 100% there for them. And when I figured out it didn't do any good to be distracted by a work deadline or thinking about who I was disappointing because I was at that baseball game or the ski meet or selling Rice Krispie bars at the swim meet, whatever it was. When I figured that out, I think the whole family benefited from that, those around me, to say, I'm here. And I will tell you, I was at a cross-country ski meet. Our son was probably about 8th, 9th grade. He was due around the corner. You know, you're out in the woods, you're along a trail. I had skis on, I had poles dangling. I was hoping not to fall down because I was holding the camera with a roll of film in it, right? And I was on the phone. We shared a cell phone because you didn't need two. Each family needed one. So Michael was in Atlanta at a CDC meeting, but he was going to call during the race from a payphone, right? So I'm standing there. I've got my skis, my poles. It's cold. I've got the camera ready to take a picture when he comes around the corner, and I'm talking to Michael on the phone, and I said, he's okay, he's about to come around. I can see him now, and I clicked, and instead of clicking the camera button, I hung up on Michael. But, you know, making the race, making the meet, being at those things sometimes meant that when bedtime happened, then it was back to work, right? And I do think loss of sleep, now that I'm retired, I'm learning that I actually needed more than 5 hours of sleep a night. But you just get along with that. I remember hauling the paper copy of NIH center proposals, you know, 3 inches thick each, to a remote ski lodge, and getting up at 4 in the morning and reviewing these grants in preparation for the meeting in Washington, so my kids wouldn't know that that was interfering with our vacation. I think that there's a fallacy that it's a zero-sum relationship, that when I give to my personal life, I detract from my professional life, and vice versa. I think that it's about an integration of those roles, and to be able to say, I'm doing the work, my professional life, that gives me energy, and that gives me energy for my personal life. And what I'm doing in my personal life, and all the interests that I have, and relationships that I have in my personal life, give me energy for going back to work, to say, okay, whew, I'm rested now, I'm refreshed, that was a great moment away, and now I'm back to work. And I think that that has been a key part. And finally, in answer to that, this may not sit well with all of us, but I think you have to figure out what you're going to shortchange. You know, we didn't get to where we are because we cut corners. We got to where we are because we did really well with the things that we're doing. But there's times when you have to say, this doesn't require all my effort. This doesn't have to be perfect. You know, it's that old 80-20 thing. And I think, you know, part of it is saying no, and part of it is saying, no, I don't have to do a great job with this. It will not make a difference. This I have to do a great job with. This I have to be perfectionistic about. This part, it doesn't matter. And I think we have to be able to do that at times in the career. And then I remember one time Michael said, do you ever feel like you're just prioritizing who you're going to disappoint? Well, that's a Debbie Downer. But it's sort of true, isn't it? That we know we cannot please everyone and get to every deadline and respond to everybody in a timely way. And so sometimes we do have to say, I can't do that. I'm sorry I didn't get to that. I totally missed that email. What can I do? You know, and that's just part of life. But if we've missed that email or disappointed someone maybe, but on the other hand, we have given to the important people in our life, maybe our priorities were okay. Yeah.
I have to tell you that Len was working on a quilt for her 8-year-old grandson when we were arranging some interviews. I bet you got it done. I hear you had a deadline for his birthday.
I got it done.
In the colors that he wanted it.
It went to the mail the day before we left for Sam. Yes.
There are some descriptions of you or stories about you that have emerged during my information gathering that I would like you to reflect on. The term generous mentor came up several times. What does that mean? Or tell me about that.
Well, I think if there were any description of my career that I would like to have, it would be that. I'm looking at some of those people that I had the opportunity to mentor. I had a wonderful role model for that in Bob Blum and in Michael. I think we've mentored each other reciprocally over the years. that's where I got my energy from, more than anything, was seeing the successes, the enthusiasm, the passion grow in the people that I mentored. It just meant it made the career worthwhile. I know we do this on behalf of adolescents, and every time we can bring another person into our line of work and get them engaged and involved in it, I think that's the best thing we can do with our energy and our skill sets and so on. So I'm happy, makes me very happy to hear that
it was
described that way.
It was a theme. Another theme that came up is that you have chosen to take some roads less traveled along the way. And I don't remember the details of this, but it had to do in your adolescent health training, and there was a track to go towards psychology or nursing, and psychology might have been the easier one for some reason at that point in your life, and you chose nursing. And then there's also been a number of examples where probably president of IAAH may have been one too. So I'm just curious about, do you reflect on them in that way, or?
Well, I think challenges are fun to embrace and say, oh, come on, I think I can do that. When I was a new faculty assistant professor, I had the opportunity to write the timing was such that in that first year I wrote a grant from the Maternal and Child Health Bureau. I'd never written it before. And but the problem was it was due 5 days after. It was due on a Wednesday, and the Friday before an R01 to NIH was due, and I was 6 months out of my PhD program. I think the Yiddish word is chutzpah. And I thought, I turned in this R01, and which didn't get funded that cycle, but the next cycle it did. And I wanted to write this training grant because it was resources to build adolescent nursing. I mean, we didn't even have that specialty name within my discipline. But yet, there were so many nurses that were working in so many settings with young people, and we needed to have that specialty. So here was this once every 5-year opportunity for a training grant, but it was due 5 days later. And I had a Mac Classic. The screen was this big, stuck in the floppy disk. My daughter thought that those slices of cheese wrapped in plastic was the same size, and so she jammed one of the 2 discs in the process of writing that grant. She was 5. But I had Mary Story, the nutrition faculty in our program, who said, Lynn, write that grant. Lynn, you can do it. And Micah would say, how much is it worth? And I said, well, I think it was $1 million over 5 years. And he'd say, write that grant, keep going, keep going. And I had this like cheering squad. And, what was working against me is my associate dean of research said, oh, Lynn, don't write that training grant. Because, I quote, she said, once you go training, you'll never be a researcher. And I went, I'm proving you wrong, honey. And I think I did. But I liked that challenge that she gave me. I don't know if our sound person is back there, but I'm getting some people signaling that I'm speaking too softly or the volume could be up. So.
Well, that leads into the perfect next phrase, passion for public speaking and teaching public speaking.
The bummer about teaching public speaking is that when you do it, you have to try to walk your talk. So I have to wear red Because anyone that's worked with me knows that you have to wear red when you're on a camera, especially.
Which also came
when
up
you're at
during
a podium.
this talk.
Yeah, yeah. When I was in college, I had one more course I needed to take out of this set of art, music, or speech. And I had already done music, and I needed one other course. And in order to avoid speech, which terrified me, I took a course on nude charcoal drawings. I still have my portfolio because it means so much to me. They were in swimsuits. It was a Lutheran college. But I was working with Bob in 1985, my first year, and he gave me the assignment, which was brilliant of him, to say we want to have, I think it was 6 keynote speakers at this conference. It's going to be Daytona Beach, Florida, called Health Futures of Youth. Several hundred people from the federal, some of you were there, and from the federal government and academic, I could see another. And will you do a bibliography? Richard Berkman published it. That would help us to know who we should invite in on these 5 different topics. And I will tell you, none of you are here, but I will tell you that person after person, I say, well, this person has really, and after I'd done this on note cards, no computers, remember? On note cards, I had said, well, we should have this person speak on endocrinology. Oh, yeah, but they're just deadly speaker. And then we'd go after another one. Well, they can't really deliver the goods from the podium, and it would go on like this. And at some point along the way, I said, you know, if we're really effectively preparing our fellows, our graduates of our program, to be advocates within their own disciplines, within the other scientists, to be able to communicate what they're doing and spread the word, they've got to be better at public speaking than some of these people that you're talking about here. So I had the opportunity to meet a person that was a great trainer in the field, came to a leadership education and adolescent health meeting of program people, Karen Kalish, some of you may remember her. And from then on, lo and behold, I was teaching public speaking. And I always said, it's not because I'm the very best. I think I'm married to one of those. But I know how to coach it. I remember one time my daughter was on the swim team, and after the race, they jumped into the pool, and the coach didn't make it to the end of the pool the quickest. And I thought, why is she a coach? She can't swim as fast as these high school girls. And then I realized, oh no, it's about teasing out performance and what makes for better performance. And that's what I just loved. I loved seeing the people in the class grow from where they were when we began and grow in those skills of speaking. So it became a real love, and I was able to carry that over in testifying at the legislature a number of times. So.
I will share with you that when I talked with Renee, we were at a meeting in D.C. and we both had red glasses on, and we felt that we were channeling you when we were talking about you.
Wonderful.
Renaissance woman. So we've talked a little bit about your professional life, but you're described as a Renaissance woman.
Well, thank you. Maybe that's like in quilt, and isn't it back to that issue of building our personal life and passions while at the same time building our professional life and passions? I learned the love of gardening from my mother, who never planted a plant once. She put it in the ground, decided it needed to be over 6 inches, move it again. My father said she got 3 times the pleasure out of every plant she put in the ground. She got to plant it 3 times. And so Michael's extremely patient. I have that same habit of replanting and replanting. I love to garden. I love to design art. I'm also an avid cross-country skier and hiker and kayaker. So I guess one time I was probably in my 30s and I heard this talk where it was a life coach, and she was a president of a community bank, and she said, I was talking to a man that was worked, way too many hours in the day, and he said, when I retire, I'm just going to sit and watch the sunsets. And she said, what makes you think you're going to know how? So I think it's about practicing who we want to be in a retirement or when we're not working. Who are we? When we take away that professional role, who are we? And that's, I guess, would lead me to why someone would describe it as Renaissance woman.
Before I open the mics up for the audience to ask you questions or share memories, is there anything else you'd like to add as a final word of wisdom or thought?
I think the theme that kept coming to mind when I was looking at these questions was about learning and paying attention to where your energy comes from. And how critical that is to our health, our relationships, what we can give to work and what we can give to our personal lives and those around us. I think the more we can identify, and maybe you have different words for that, but the more you can identify where your energy comes from, I think it's been a really key part. And part of my energy, a large part of my energy, comes from having a wonderful partner in life. So, life partner. Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. The mics are open. If anyone would like to share anything about Lynn or ask her questions, this is your time.
Rich.
You can hear me, because I don't think this is on, or is it?
I think they turned it on now.
It's on now, okay, thank you. Thank you so much for being you and all that you've done. And I can remember the SAM meeting where the name change issue came up. Trina Anglin was president, and I had what I thought was a brilliant idea, because we had been told you can't change the name of SAM because we just paid $200 to get the SAM logo made. And if we change the name, we're going to have to change the logo. And I claimed what I thought was a brilliant compromise. We had an overhead projector, and I took a picture of the CDC, which said CDC, but when you write it out, it's the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I said, we can still keep the SAM, but we call ourselves, and it was real interesting how that went down. Anyway, I'm so proud that we're the Society for Adolescent Health and Medicine, and I think we'll eventually get to the point for Society for Adolescent Health Wellness or something like that. But the words, as you talked about, language is important. And we are now a multidisciplinary organization. Do you think we're ready to become an interprofessional organization?
I think we've come a tremendous way over the last 20 years. I think that if you come to the event tonight, Deborah Katzman asked a number of us if we do 1 minute and 15-second videos speaking on a certain topic, and she wanted me to speak on the SAM name change. And Michael said, how about if I am like an interviewer and I ask you the question? I said, by the time you get done with your question, I'll have 10 seconds left. I said, what a bad idea. But I think that when I proposed it, the name change at the business meeting, and I know that those that were on the board at the time took the question very seriously, but felt that it wasn't now that was the right time to do it. And so Michael and I kind of waited, not very patiently. You know how they say, thank you for your patience. And I say to Michael, you know, when you're on hold and you go, I'm not patient right now. I'm not being patient. So we weren't very patient. So 5 years later, Michael made the same resolution at the microphone. And I think Sam was more ready for it at that time. There's a huge difference between tolerance, being tolerated, and being embraced. And I think Sam needed to communicate to its members that we embrace the interdisciplinary, interprofessional talents that are brought to the field of adolescent health, that are brought to this meeting, that you see everywhere throughout the meeting. I think we have room to grow. I think we also have room to continually grow. And I hope that, and I know actually, that there are colleagues here, new colleagues, colleagues that have been members for a number of years, that will continue to nudge and nudge and nudge and persist to say, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And here's one way we could take another step. Let's change this. Let's think about our language. Let's have leadership with the diversity that we now have. I mean, there have been so many changes in that direction that I'm so glad to see. But yes, I think we can continue to work in that direction. Hello.
Hi, Jen Griffith Weapon from OHSU School of Nursing. I'm a second-year PhD student, trained as a family nurse practitioner, and was a LEA fellow actually at University of Cincinnati almost 20 years ago. And I came to this meeting. It's been a long time since I've been to a SAM meeting. I came to be inspired, and I want to thank you for doing just that.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hi, Lynn. I'm Claire Brindis from the University of California, San Francisco, with the Adolescent and Young Adult Health National Resource Center, among a number of hats. And I, too, want to thank you very much. I think of you and Michael as sort of the royalty of SAM. And I would like to hear a little bit about what words of wisdom would you give to emerging scholars, as well as ourselves, living in a very complex and complicated environment and context for the work that we're doing. You have been a champion around advocacy, as Michael has, both in your state, nationally, and globally. But what words of encouragement would you give to the next generation?
Persist. I know that's used quite a bit. Get T-shirts with that on it. She persisted. I think it's so critical to keep working toward the goal and not give up the goal. You know, there's the old joke of the guy that keeps saying, praying to God and saying, God, how come you don't let me win the lottery? You know, I prayed and prayed and prayed to win the lottery, and God responds, buy a ticket. You know, I think we have to buy tickets in that lottery of life. I think we need to say, you know, I wrote a paper as a PhD student, a thought piece, concept piece on development. And I was encouraged by my professor to send it in for publication. And I got a one-sentence review back. It said, reads like a high school textbook. So I did not resubmit that one, but I said, this is not the end of my publishing career. It was my second ever attempt. And I know somebody, well, who submitted their dissertation 7 times before it was accepted for publication. I'm not looking at them right now, but 7 times. So I think that to say, I know where I want to be, now maybe this particular route I'm taking isn't the best route. And so you reassess that and say, now, what other ways? And I think it does come back to those 3 C's, my communication, connections, and contributions. That I remember Marcia Schuett arrived at the university for a faculty position, and Bob said to her, you know, your job this year is to go out for coffee with people and meet people, make those connections. And they're invaluable. And you never know the pathway that they're going to lead, where it's going to take you. But if they're honest, genuine, authentic connections that you make with people, I think that's critical to being successful. And young scholars, as you posed in your question, need to persist and say, I can do this, and tap into the resources. Have more than one mentor. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Find the mentors you need for the skill sets you want to develop. Name those skill sets. Think about, what do I need to get to where I'm going? And how can I build those skill sets, and how can I create the future that I'm seeing right now? Don't give up that goal. Don't give up that picture of your future, but find pathways for getting there.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi,
Elizabeth
Liz.
Ozer from University of California, San Francisco. It's wonderful to be here with you today and the others in the room, and I want to thank you for just being so connecting and warm and supportive of me throughout the years. I also think you forgot a very important activity when you listed, and that's shopping, which I think I associate with almost all meetings with you around the world, is having some shopping part that goes with that. Yeah, I should have worn something that I bought with you, actually. I do have something with me at SAM. But I also wanted to say, and I also very much appreciate being included over the years as a friend of Minnesota. That's always been very meaningful. And you know, one of the things I was thinking about, and I think it leads when you talk about advocacy, is that although, as I said, you're one of the most connecting, supportive, warm people that I know, you really speak truth, and you're willing to challenge. And I've been very inspired by that those things are not mutually exclusive. You're willing to ask a hard question in the room and push people, and I think you're very effective at doing that. So I've really appreciated that, and I've appreciated that modeling for me. And I also wanted to say, when you were talking about that being present in the moment, I also think that's something that I've really taken away. I was writing down some notes, and I think it goes beyond the work and family, right? Because I think that's what I see at meetings. I see, let's go out, let's have fun, let's meet people, let's sort of wherever we are. And I'm assuming that's true when you're mentoring students and you can't be thinking about the grants you have due. It's just being able to be present and enjoy people and be where you are. So I've really appreciated that time with you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You know, I have, in the last several years, faced the challenge of breast cancer. And one of the takeaways that has been invaluable is learning, first of all, to acknowledge and express gratitude. And that is transforming. Second is reminding myself you can choose your attitude. You can choose the way you're going to go in for surgery. You can choose the way you're going to go in and have that first chemo, the attitude to have during it. Yeah, many challenges. But the other practice that Michael and I have learned through this is to state an intention for the day. And Liz, I think that on the days where my stated intention is to connect with those around me. Maybe that's a chemo day. Maybe that's a surgery day. Maybe that's a day where I'm going to go work out. Those days are especially blessed. They're just fun days. Because when you start to connect with people around you, whether it's the person that you see at the gas station or the person that serves you coffee or whatever it is, it's so transforming of the day. So learning to state an intention for the day, either to oneself or to someone you're with, is pretty powerful, and I think that's one of the gifts of the health challenges of the last several years.
Well, my name is Chris Stahl, and I'm from Chicago, just down the Great Lakes chain. I was a late fellow. I finished my adolescent medicine fellowship at age 50. And I've now been retired for 3 years. But I'm back at SAM this year after a period of absence, and it relates to something that Lynn and Michael did a number of years ago when we had a SAM meeting here in Seattle. It was the outbreak of the Iraq War, and there was a big demonstration outside. And I and my brother, who lives in town, were out there. I didn't see a lot of other SAM members out there, and I was a little disappointed. And when I came back up into the hotel and the convention, I wasn't quite sure how I'd be received. And I ran into Michael and Lynn and told them where I'd been, and immediately they were very positive and endorsing. And you know, I felt like, okay, I guess I am in the right place. That was the year that Karen Worf and I got together and tried to start a peace SIG, another challenge that SAM wasn't quite ready for. So it ended up being called Armed Conflict Adolescents and Young Adults. And we staggered on for a few years, and I'm back this year because the peace SIG got revived. And I think you had a role in that, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Melissa.
Melissa Kang from Sydney, Australia. I decided to come here, Lynn, to hear you rather than the IAAH meeting, so I'm feeling a bit guilty. But I felt that one of us needed to be here, at least, to thank you. I met you and Michael in about 1992 in Melbourne, I think. And you've both been great friends of Australia. And I just wanted to say that for me personally, the first time I met you both consolidated my passion for working in this field, and I went on to have a career in adolescent medicine in Australia. I'm currently the president of the National Association for Adolescent Health, and I think I drew from those early meetings from you, you know, new ideas that you brought to Australia that we have since put into our policies, our research, really influenced clinical practice and research and the way we think about adolescent health and well-being. But also just wanted to thank you personally, because even though I've only met you very intermittently over the years, I always felt like you could almost read my mind. As you know, I was a single mum for many, many years, and you know, it was a struggle at times. And I always felt that you understood what it was like. And I want to thank you for that.
Thank you, Melissa. Questions?
We're at the end of our time, and thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Lynn, for being here with us and for all of your contributions to SAM and to the field of adolescent and young adult health. From all of us, thank you.
And thank you for asking me to do this so much.